We are here to manifest a new earth. But what does it mean exactly? And how do we create it? Welcome to Let's Get Inspired. I am so grateful for your presence, and my desire is for this moment together to be a source of inspiration for your path. I am Gwenalai Woods, a seeker of wholeness, and know deep in my heart that we can restore harmony. In this episode, I am exploring the culture from a different perspective I have been developing to heal division within. I share where my understandings come from and how I discovered a way of looking at our challenges which could help realign with life. I hope you will find this angle insightful. The main part for me about wanting to see the culture in a different way is to heal the division, the separation. So through my studies, especially with shamanism, I developed the knowledge of other dimensions, other realms. And that's been the first doorway for me to see something new with the culture. I started to see the culture in a realm. I started to look at it that way. And then what I started to notice is that we were living in the realm of the physical world. Yes, that's obvious. But what I started to become aware of is that the culture was set up in a way where the physical realm was the only reality. And I see this as the source of our suffering. There was a beginning to this culture. Before it started, there was a time when we were in perfect harmony with the earth and we knew how to interact in a conscious way. And then something happened, and there are so many stories about what might have happened. I'm not so interested in exploring that part simply because I always look for something that helps me resolve the now, the present. That's where I'm challenged. I'm challenged with the now. So, however, looking back helps make sense. So, our culture, of course, started at some point. And that's the point, actually, is that our culture is a way. And due to the way it's been structured, we came to believe that it was the only way. So it feels to me that to manifest our new earth, we absolutely need to completely, radically transform the culture, transform the foundation. And that's what I'm really interested in. I'm interested in understanding the foundation. I tend to look in an overview kind of way. I like to see the whole. I like to look at it so that I can understand how it links together. So when I look at the foundation of our culture, what I see is a structure based on the reality of the physicality of life only. And what it looks like to me is that from this place, all of our definitions and all of our understandings are only based on the physical. And it's the only that I'm really interested in. And it took me a really long time to see it. But with my studies of shamanism and my learning that there were many realms, that's when I started to see that, of course, the physical realm was not the only one. So when we look back, we can see in the history that this perspective of physical reality only was imposed, and everything that had to do with the invisible was cast out. The way I see the awakening we're going through now is that we are reclaiming what has been cast out. In the meantime, the way it's been exiled has happened through a lot of violence and a lot of suffering. So what I'm interested in through a shift of perspective is to see another story so that we can transform. Because if we stay within this story of the culture, there's no way out. We just keep repeating the same things because of the foundation, because of what it's based on. And what makes it really challenging is that what it is based on has been reinforced time after time through a lot of suffering. So the point of my quest is to be able to shift perspective, to see another story so that there can be a reintegration. And what I find very helpful is that with this awareness, when it gets challenging, then we can shift our perspective to see that actually the story told by the culture is very limiting. There are other stories, there are much bigger stories. But because it's been built through so much violence, there are many triggers when we start to open ourselves to another story because we have been forbidden. And what I'm interested in is to not get lost in the blame, because again, that keeps us in the game of the culture. So, what would it mean to see something else so that we don't blame what has been done? Seeing that there are other stories and that it was based on a perspective, that's where I feel a doorway to resolution. When we can see and accept that it's been based on a perspective, the perspective of the physical realm only. And the truth of it is that we live in many different realms and dimensions here on Earth. And again, seeing these other realm and dimension is a question of perspective. And that's the great challenge, is that our culture has been saying, no, 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 there's only one perspective. If it's not physical, it doesn't exist. The trick with this perspective is that it's very limiting, and it is limiting in a destructive way. And that is why I want to find a new story so that there can be some inclusion to heal and to shift, most of all, to shift from destructive to harmonious. It's a huge job. And we are going through the beginning of it in the way that I see it. And there are so many angles and so many different ways to handle it, of course. And they're all valid. My angle, my offering, what I bring to the table is this notion of perspective. That is how I've been able to work on diffusing the pain, on reconnecting to life. Because what I see in the perspective of our culture is a separation from life. So it's a very deep subject and it's very complex. And I like to simplify as much as I can because otherwise it's easy to get lost. The main part is, for me, the perspective. And we need a new story. And to have a new story, we have to shift perspective. We cannot create something new from the culture we're in. So what I find really, really important and helpful is to be able to see that our culture is only a way. It is not the way. It is a way. However, we've been forbidden to see that it is just a way. So it can be really tricky to get, out of that story. Because of course, in the foundation of this structure, there is a lot of control and a lot of restrictions. So we are going through the process of, you could say, weeding. And first we have to become aware. What needs to be realigned? Where do we need to look in order to reharmonize? And my point is, we cannot reharmonize within the culture. What I have come to understand is that the culture is not about wholeness. The culture has a different angle. It is perceiving only through the physical realm. So when we reclaim wholeness, it shifts everything. Because, for example, if we take separation, yes, we are separate. And when you look at it from the angle of the culture, it's a negative thing. I bring another angle. How about this one? How about actually we are experiencing individuation? We're individuating. It's the realm of individuating. Isn't that actually magical? Because as you know, everything is energy, everything is vibration. It's something that is well known now. So the realm of the physical is a lower vibration so that it can be manifested. We tend to see it as something negative, the low vibration. I'm coming to the point where I disagree with the seeing it as negative. It's just a different vibration. It's necessary in order for things to manifest in a physical sense. So, what I see is that if it works together with other vibrations, then it's not separate anymore. So, what we are going through is the reintegration of other realms. I call them realms because what I find really helpful in looking at it this way is that when you think about a realm, it encompasses a whole way of working. It's a whole world in itself, and it's complete in itself. So the realm of the physical is complete in itself, and it operates through particular rules which belong only to the physical realm, such as in the physical realm, everything is separate. So by seeing a bigger picture, by reintegrating other realms, we can start to see how they work together. So if I am really, really simplistic, what I would say is I see two realms, the physical realm and the invisible realm. And of course, each of them encompasses a whole lot of other dimension and other things. But as a general thing, to make it easier to observe, what has been hidden, what has been deeply rejected from the cultural structure is the invisible. The thing is, the visible and the invisible coexist. And what I see us as going through is that very remembrance, the partnership between the visible and the invisible. And what I feel we are becoming aware of is that they cannot work in isolation. So basically, we have made the experience, we've been going through the experience of being in the physical realm only. And now, as our consciousness is rising, we are starting to see that the physical realm actually cannot function properly without the invisible realm, because there is a deep partnership going on between the two, and they support each other. So, what the cultural structure has done is it has separated, it has shut down that partnership because it was based on the fact that it's only physical. The other thing that I see with this is that then what the culture has done is, of course, all of the definitions are based on the physical. And what this has done is it has negated the invisible side within all things. So, the physical realm, there's nothing wrong with it, but it cannot work on its own. That is what we are invited to remember through this awakening. And the great challenge is that this culture has been going on for an extremely long time. And it's not that easy to shift perspective because we are so entrained in this culture. We are so embedded in the structure. So we have to pull out and have an overview, making it possible to see another story. It's like coming out of the forest, in order to see it. We cannot see the forest when we're down in the trees. And that's where we are. We're down in the trees. So we have to take a bird's view so we can see the forest. With the culture, this means we have to take a bird's view so that we can see the culture and work towards reclaiming wholeness, reclaiming the part that has been left out. And I find that when we look at this through perspective, it is really helpful in the sense that it makes it a lot easier not to fall into blame, not to fall into pointing fingers, dividing again and again. We can see that this perspective of separation our culture has been immersed in is creating more and more and more division. That's the negative aspect of separation. The invitation is, if you start looking at it from the place of separation is actually an individuation. We've individuated. Each of us has become manifested in a realm, and it works together with other realms, with other realities. reclaiming these other realities is how we can reclaim our wholeness. Because the point of it is that we cannot function without the other realms. So, what we are becoming aware of is the destructiveness of having a very limiting perspective, which is the culture. The culture has a very limiting perspective because it views everything only from its physical aspect. Now, with the human suffering, what this has created that I have been seeing by adopting the other view and the shift of perspective is that, as I said earlier, we define everything from the form. So, on the human side, what this means is that, well, then, when we are women, it means that that's all we are. We only have the feminine aspect. And when we are men, that's all we have. We only have the men. So this creates an amazing distortion because the truth of it is we are both. If you think of attributes instead of gender, the masculine attributes are everything physical, everything that is one, that is I. That is masculine attributes. Feminine attributes is everything that's invisible. It's the we, it's connected, it doesn't have boundaries. So, what we have done is we have divided through this perspective of the culture. And what's happened is that it makes it incredibly challenging for women to get in touch with their masculine attributes and for men to get in touch with their feminine attributes. And what makes it even more challenging is that the culture says you don't have those other attributes. If you're woman, that's all you are. If you're man, that's all you are. So unconsciously, we are constantly banging against, we're not even supposed to have these attributes. So you can see it in a very general way. You can see it in the challenges that usually women have with boundaries. Well, boundaries is a masculine attribute. Boundaries define. So we are attempting to integrate an ability when the culture is saying, you don't have that. You're not a man. You don't have this ability. Of course, this runs unconsciously. That's what I became aware of. And for men, it has to do with sensitivity. It has to do with the heart. It has to do with the softness. It has to do with the we. So it's incredibly challenging for them to be in touch with their heart because, again, the culture is saying, no, 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 you don't have those attributes. You're a man. You're a tough one. You know, you don't go into the heart. That's mushy. That's woman stuff. Men don't cry. So there you go. So men have been asked to disengage with the heart, while women have been asked to disengage with the self. The roles have been extremely limiting. And the great suffering that I see is because we have been denied the other side of ourselves. And the other side of ourselves is our wholeness. We all have a heart, and we all have the ability to have boundaries. But how can you possibly reintegrate these when you live in a culture that says you don't have it? That's my point. That's what I saw one day as I was looking for my way, because I am very challenged with all of the masculine attributes. Standing on my own 2 feet is definitely an incredible challenge for me. And that's how I started to see this. When I started to look at it from the perspective of attributes, and I saw that all of my challenges, pretty much all of my challenges, are masculine attributes: standing on my own 2 feet, being assertive, having boundaries, building, moving forward. All of these are masculine attributes. It opened a whole new way of looking for me. And that is really what I want to share with you. And that is where I feel that a shift of perspective is absolutely essential. From where I'm looking now, without a shift of perspective, there's no way of reclaiming our wholeness, because we are embedded in a culture that says you don't have it. You do not have it. So yes, Of course, things keep changing and we work on getting them better. But if we work on getting them better within the culture, it is not going to get anywhere. Because look at how we perceive a woman that's going to be strong, or how we perceive a man that's going to be soft. How do we change these things? How do we reintegrate? How do we accept who we are when our tendencies is not going in the sense of the culture? And that was my greatest challenge, is that it was obvious. Some of us have had an easier time to fit in, have had an easier time to deny some parts of themselves and fit into the culture and follow through with what the culture was asking. I haven't been able to do that. It's been too challenging for me. And that's what got me to look for a way to exist. How do I exist? And I couldn't find my way within the culture because there was nowhere where who I was could fit. So that's where I started to develop this other view. And then I had that shift of perspective. So we exist in a culture that has at its foundation the perspective of the physical realm only. We do not accept anything that is not proven, physically proven. And that's where I see the problem, if you want to call it a problem. And that's where I feel the shift of perspective to be essential. So to be at peace with what's going on. What I work on and what I feel can help us is once we see that it is a question of perspective, it can really help coming out of the blame and the anger and all of that. Because when you start to see another story, you can start making sense. And when you can start making sense, you can see why we do what we do. You can understand the level of division and violence from that place. And what is the solution? What is the answer? Reclaiming our wholeness. And how do we reclaim our wholeness? Well, in what I have observed and where I stand, we become aware of what the culture is based on so that we can see and understand our own inner functioning. Because what the culture has trained is in us. Basically, to go on a deep level, what I do see is that the training of this culture has made us hate ourselves. We are rejecting ourselves. How many of us have a hard time to love ourselves? I find it one of the most challenging things to do. And this is where, again, for me, it has been essential with this shift of perspective to become aware. And then it's a reintegration, and that's where the work is. And yes, sometimes it can be incredibly challenging. And we need to constantly remind ourselves and become aware of our inner training. The training from this culture is saying, you are not enough. You need something from the outside in order to feel complete. What I see in this is I see the negative side, because it is true that we are not separate. What does it mean then that we are not good enough? The truth of it is, we cannot possibly function on our own. It doesn't work that way. It's always a partnership. But because the culture is very, very limiting and has hidden the invisible side, we are unable to function correctly, and we do feel that we're not good enough, and it is being reinforced by the culture. The thing is, once we reclaim our wholeness, once we reclaim our partnership with the invisible side of life, we are enough because we are meant to be in partnership with life. So we cannot function without it. But what I'm seeing is that we cannot reclaim it without transforming the culture from within, without reclaiming the invisible side. So I don't want to judge the culture. There's no point. It doesn't go anywhere, and it actually keeps us in the game. Whenever we come from a place of division and separation, we keep the game going. And my whole quest is always based on how do we include? What does it mean to include? What I am seeing is that inclusion starts within. If all of us were going within, reconnecting ourselves consciously to the invisible side of life, reclaiming our wholeness, the culture would automatically be transformed because it wouldn't exist in the form it exists in anymore. It wouldn't. With wholeness, the way the culture is set up does not exist. So, how do we come out of division? We restore wholeness from within. And to support this, we shift perspective so that we can see the invisible side of life in order to reclaim it, so that we can see what the culture is based on in order to see something else. So, this is what I bring to the table. This is what I've been becoming aware of. And even more so with the awakening, because of course, my consciousness, like you, is rising and I see more. And what is becoming very clear to me is that the suffering actually only exists within the culture. It is due to the perspective the culture is based on. It is due to the structure. When we are whole, there is no suffering anymore. So, without becoming aware, we have no way of creating the new earth. The way that I see the new earth is the reintegration of the invisible side of life. And that's what we're going through now. And there are so many of us now that are sharing their angle, their perspective, their insights. So, the insights that I bring is a question of perspective, so that we can come out of the judging and the division, so that we can allow a person to be exactly where they are. We are awakening. That is what the awakening is doing. And in the meantime, the first thing we become aware of course, is the pain and the suffering and the distortion. But in order to understand that distortion, we need a shift of perspective. Otherwise, we can get quite lost because it's horrific. So when we shift our perspective, we can see what it's been based on, and we can work on ourselves to reclaim wholeness from within, so that at least we individually work on coming out of division. Because the divisions goes on inside. We have it inside of us. We do it to ourselves. Everything we're seeing in the world, we're doing to ourselves because it's based on separating. So as we can become aware of this, we have a way to support ourselves, to restore, to validate our own suffering. And what I find so valuable is that we can then have meaning. We can understand the suffering. This is a place of great pain within me because this has been telling that story of separation. And then we can help ourselves restore, reconnect. I call it a reconnection because basically we are already whole. It's a question of perspective. We already have it all within. It's a question of perspective. So when we reclaim our wholeness, we can see. And all the places that are in pain are the places that are disconnected. So there's nothing wrong with these places and nothing is missing. It's a question of reconnecting the flow, repairing the inner relationship, because it is meant to all relate in a harmonious way. It is meant to all support and share. We are built this way. We are built this way. However, we exist in a culture that has been saying otherwise. And through thousands of years of incredible suffering, we have come to a place where we are asleep. We've been falling asleep. Of course, we've had a lot of help for this. And a lot of suffering was created. So the way I see it, we are not meant to suffer. We are not here to suffer. To come out of that, we need to create a new story. We need to have a story of inclusion. Our culture is based on the story of separation. And what I see is that, again, through a shift of perspective, we can start to see separation as actually an individuation. And how magical is it to be physical? How magical is it to be able to interact with things in a physical sense? There is no way of seeing this if we stay in the perspective of separation in its negative way. So the culture has been set in a reality and imposing the fact that it was the reality, the only reality. We are awakening to no, 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 it is not the only reality. The trick now is, how do we include? How do we come out of the division? And that's my angle on how to. That's one approach I am offering, having a shift of perspective so that we can reclaim a wholeness. We already have it all within. There's nowhere to look. There is nowhere to look. It's all there. So a shift of perspective can help us reconnect. And that's what I call it, a reconnection. We live in a very, very disconnected culture and nothing is missing. But without a shift of perspective, we are not going to see it. We are going to try to reconnect with the outside. But the thing is, it needs to happen on the inside. When we mend from the inside, then we can see the new, we can reclaim. And from that place, we can build a new earth. So it's a process. It's a process, it's very progressive. And we are pioneer in this. You know, it hasn't been so long that we are starting to become aware, but that's the nature of our time, is becoming conscious. And the first thing we become conscious of is where we've been. And where we've been is really traumatic. It's been incredibly disconnected. The culture is based on scarcity. You cannot have wholeness when you look at life through scarcity. However, scarcity is a perspective. It's a reality. Yes, it encompasses a whole lot of things, but it's not the only one. That's what I really want to invite you to, in your own way, become aware of. The culture we are living in is not the only way. It is set up in a particular perspective, and there are many others. We can absolutely restore harmony, and this starts within. So it is my invitation, a shift of perspective, to see something new, to see more, to see wholeness. And then from that place, we can find our way into reconnecting ourselves so that we become that wholeness. We reclaim the flow of life. What we are reclaiming is life. Earth is life. We are deeply connected to the earth. We are earth beings. And when we reclaim the invisible side, we can start to have a conscious co-creation, because the physical is deeply intimate with the non-physical. They work together. And that is what we are in the process of remembering. This is a remembrance because there was a time when we knew this already, and we carry that knowledge within. So as we mend ourselves, as we reconnect, as we reclaim our wholeness, we step back into our knowing. And way back when, we knew, and that is in us. We have the ability to remember. We have the ability to reconnect. The other thing I would add about the culture is that the culture is based on beliefs. Wholeness is based on knowing. Beliefs come from someone else. Knowledge comes from a direct experience. So the way the culture has been structured is it has been saying only what's outside of you is real. Only what is physical is real. The culture only looks at the form. The invisible is within, the doorway is within, the knowing is within. And what makes it greatly challenging is that this is what the culture has forbid us to do. So to come out of this blaming because it's created so much suffering, when we shift our perspective, we can see, the culture is based on physicality only. All right, let's reintegrate the wholeness of life. So that's my invitation, that is my angle, so that together we can reclaim life and find harmony and consciously co-create our new earth.